This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for How to SuperAge with Elise Marie Collins. And Elise, it looks like your guest is in this tropical paradise, and I'm here in Cleveland, Ohio, where it just snowed.
Yep. Yes. So before we get started with our guest, I'm going to do a little commercial break, and I can't wait to hear more about where our guest is. But until then, I'm going to talk a little bit about my book, SuperAger. Have you ever thought about what you're going to do as you get older, whatever that means? What is older? It's a moving target. We're all getting older. I'm Elise Collins, and I struggled with my aging identity. It just didn't fit with the paradigm around me. And I think we're going to hear a little bit about aging and elders with our guest today. For me, I wrote the book SuperAger, and I started this podcast because I wanted to shift the paradigm of aging. And so I filled this book with stories and tips, and we're going to hear more tips today from our special guest that I'll introduce in a moment. So tips and tricks, but also stories of what I call superagers. And they're everyday people who've done what we might think of as extraordinary, but they really just broke through their own limiting beliefs and embraced their purpose and their passion. And they became more of who they are and just did amazing things as they got older. One person I'm thinking of right now is Dow Porchon Lynch. I'm thinking of her because she's also a yoga teacher, and our guest is a yoga teacher. And Dow Porchon Lynch led an amazing, incredible life. And she passed away at the age of 101 years old. And you can look her up. She also has a wonderful TED Talk, and she's in the book SuperAger. So now I'm going to get to our guest today. And I've known her for many years. We've been traveling on a yogic path for many years together. So I'm really excited to have her today. Hayley Ebersole is an ancestral folk medicine keeper who synergizes earth-based ritual with yoga, personal training, and wellness coaching. What a combination. She supports soulful visionaries to release stress. Yeah, that totally makes sense. By reconnecting them to their bodies. She guides healing yoga retreats in Costa Rica, and she works privately with international clients. And she's also the creator of the Body Mind Freedom membership, where fitness meets the wisdom of nature's harmonious cycles. I'm so excited to have her today. And is there anything else you want to add to that bio? I added a little my own flavor and I messed it up a little, but I think the audience got the idea.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I'm so grateful to be here with you both, Elise and Karen. Thank you for having me.
And you're in Costa Rica. Tell us a little bit. You just moved there, maybe just because if you're watching, everybody, you see she's got some prayer flags, and it looks like a hammock and some tropical vegetation behind her. It really looks like she's in the rainforest, but you see she's got a yard. So tell us about where you are and how you got to where you are.
Yes. So I find myself today in Costa Rica in the Guanacaste Peninsula on the West Coast in a little town called Nosara. And so my partner and I have been deeply connected with this region my partner's been connected with this region for the last 16 years and me for the last 5 years. But in the last 2 years, as things just became more and more intense on the home front in the United States in terms of just division between humans and the exaggeration of disconnection from nature, it just felt like, okay, it's time to make that leap, to make that jump, and to gather our savings and switch our location so that we could be more surrounded, more in connection with the jungle and the forests and the medicinal plants we love, and the ocean and the sunset and the sunrise. It is on this beach town that we live in, it is a tradition that most people in the town who can go out onto the beach at sunset. And that's where the community gathers. That's what is valued on this land. And we're all about it. We're so excited to be here and to be just kind of cocooning our hearts in that we are being here feels like such just an invitation into hope and inspiration for the future of the planet, that we are remembering as a collective that we can live in harmony with nature. We can use the incredible technology and all the evolution of the past few hundred years to reconnect to our humanity and to live in a regenerative way.
Wow. I'm envious.
Yeah.
Mildly.
Yeah.
We've got a retreat coming up. Come visit.
Okay, great. We'll have all the info in the show links. I want to ask you how you just really painted a picture of a community that's living in touch with nature, the cycles of nature. I mean, on a good day, I drive or walk to somewhere where I can see the sunset, but it sounds like it's a daily part of your daily routine and daily rhythm. How do you see being in touch with nature and earth cycles, daily, weekly, lunar cycles, and annual cycles? How can that help us age? How can we, as humans, get in touch with those cycles, or how do you see them tying in with aging?
Oh, such a beautifully put question. So really, I have found it so helpful to remember and to put into context that really the light bulb was invented in the 1880s, and industrialization and urbanism, this is all really in terms of the history of humankind. Capitalism, industrialism, all of this is so new, and it's almost like I heard such a beautiful word on a podcast, a beautiful concept, which was biological mismatch, that our physical bodies aren't quite, not that they aren't even quite, it's like they're not even close to catching up with the incredible shifts and changes around us that have occurred within the last few hundred years. And that is by no means to put down all of the amazing evolution that we've come to as humans, but it is to really remember that our great grandmothers were living in a world where they didn't actually really have a choice whether or not to be in connection with nature. It wasn't like, oh, that's a cute little thing, I'm gonna run off and go to practice my yoga and do my woo-woo thing and be in harmony with nature. It's just that was how humans survived. We couldn't survive unless we were living in a web of interconnection and understanding that our well-being, our capacity to feed ourselves, our capacity to have healthy bodies, to have healthy families and communities really depended on our environment. And that balance it continues to be a one of reciprocity with nature. And when that shifts, which it has in the past few hundred years, as maybe human hubris, if we call it, has kind of shifted us away from that reliance on our direct environment, we forget that we are actually interconnected. We are not just here to study the cycles of the moon or to think of it again as some cutesy thing, but the cycles of the moon directly relate to how our bodies are in their health and wellness, how we are connected to different strains of emotion that move through us, how our communities can best gather on various days. So the cycles of Earth's cycles of light and darkness, which we can think of as the year, That's the solar cycle. So the year has its seasons. There's the seasonal cycle of the sun. And then we have our monthly cycle, which depends on the moon. And if you happen to have a uterus, you're very familiar with how the moon cycles impact your health, your well-being, your inner state. And then, of course, the day, which is in relationship to the gentle tilting of our planet. And that is, morning, evening, of course. And all of these cycles are actually mirroring each other. That we've come into, really in the last few hundred years, we've come into the misunderstanding of time as being a linear experience, when in fact we're remembering that we see all around us that time is actually a circular experience. We have winter that moves into spring, that moves into summer, fall, and back to winter. We have the full moon that wanes into the new moon and then rises back to the full moon. We have the sunrise every day and the sunset. And that our bodies are by no means separate from any of these cycles at all. And as much as we might ignore or deny our interrelationship with our environment, every single hormone in our body is attuned to these cycles. Unless, of course, we're inside with electric lights all day sitting. Yeah, that does tend to mess with our hormones and to cause unnecessary suffering. So not only is our daily experience really guided and dictated by these cycles, but of course, our own life cycle is also that same cycle of the year. We have the newness in which we're born and expand and we grow. We build to a ripeness in which we offer new projects into the world, be those humans, whether we're giving birth and parenting, whether we're parenting books, projects, businesses. And ultimately the time comes when we enter into our deep fall and even winter years, when it's really a matter of harvesting the wisdom of our life. That doesn't mean to separate ourselves or to be, sitting in a rocking chair all the time. That is nowhere, by no means is that what that means. It's simply that really the beauty of the cycle of the human life, really the point of it all, is to pass it on, to offer and to give back to the future, to we forget that we're part of the people, right? And our purpose is to support the people, to keep the people going. And of course, on a biological level, our DNA is striving to do that all the time. But on a deeper level, we're here not, as we often think of it in the capitalist framework, just to claw our way up and get as much as we can as individuals. But in fact, we're here to cultivate as much nutrient-dense fruit to pass on to future generations. And by remembering and inviting ourselves back into the practice of being with these cycles, of which I'm happy to offer some practical, because I know this is very theoretical here, but when we do remember and invite ourselves back into the harmony of these cycles, we call out the egocentric culture in which we live, in which really capitalism, as beautiful as this experiment has been, it does rely on a very damaging cultural mythology, which is that there is a possibility of ceaseless youth, that there is a possibility of constant productivity, that working 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week will create fulfillment. And it's just not true. And it's coming more and more. We're waking up, we're realizing that this is not true. And a huge part of that is embracing the aging process and stepping back in to the current of nature. Just stepping back into this concept that everything around us is alive, that we are part of this never-ending cycle of offering the fruit forward to promote life, to support life, to allow life to thrive. So on a very theoretical level, this is the answer to your question. And this is really the crux of my work of bringing women together, especially to honor the cycles of our life, to recognize and acknowledge this process of wisdom making, of inner growth, of ripening in us.
I think Karen wants to, Karen. maybe
No,
just-
I am feeling like, I'm feeling like I'm there with you, because what you're expressing is that what many of us are experiencing here in the United States or in an industrial area is that we don't observe what we're going through. We just go through the motions. And listening to you, it was like I can see myself, letting go a little bit, which typically I don't. So I mean, I appreciate, how you talk about that.
Yeah, I love that. I gleaned a lot about humility and nature teaching us humility. And I wonder if, I've studied gerontology, and that's more of a Western science, but I do find it very related to what I've studied in Ayurveda, because it's one of those disciplines where we have to study everything. It's like a lot of Western disciplines are like psychology. It's all about your mind. What's in here? But gerontology, what I love about it is you study policy, politics. We can talk about capitalism. It's on the table. And we talk about sociology, and we talk about medicine. Everything's in it. And that's what I also hear you saying. But one thing we do talk about in gerontology is ageism. And we can even, as we get older, we can also have limiting beliefs about what we should or shouldn't do as we get older. So I wonder if you have anything to say about that. With how do you work with your students who might have negative thoughts about their aging process?
Mm-hmm. That's a beautiful question. So what I've found in working with the cycles of nature in community with, especially with women, is that as we come to remember that these cycles are organic to our experience, it's really because the human mind works in story, and we absorb so much better when we have an image, when we have a symbol, when we have a story, that embracing archetypes from various cultures has been, for me, incredibly powerful. And we all have different backgrounds. Elise, you and I study in the yoga lineage, various yoga lineages, and have access to the incredible fecundity and richness of that pantheon of Indian stories. But really, it's all of our people, wherever our people are from. And ultimately, they're all from Africa in the end, in the beginning. But wherever our people are from, we've understood the human experience through these symbols of God, goddess, through these images. And unlike modern conceptions of what God, goddess might mean or call up for the modern human, something that's so beautiful about the yoga realm is that, the goddesses and the gods, they're not these perfect beings that sit up in the clouds just as pure essence of light. In fact, they're very human. They're very, they're very, they have foibles. They have shadows. They have ways that they forget their essence and then come to remember it again. So for me, as someone who I really was born, we all carry different archetypes, right? And I really feel like I was born as an old woman. Like when I was young, I literally pictured myself as an old being, sitting in a rocking chair in my giant library. Like this is how I've always conceptualized myself from the time I was really young. So I'm carrying a lot of that. Some of us are just eternally youthful. And what a gift, what a blessing to just be holding the maiden archetype. But when we look at the way that the year, let's say the wheel of the year maps onto the life cycle. For women, we might say, the maiden energy of the curiosity, and then the mother energy of the nurturing, the really channeling love. And then that also carries around that time really the warrior energy of what do we love? What are we willing to die for? What are we here to change? We're mothering the earth, we're mothering the future. And then moving into the wise woman archetype, which really carries also medicine woman, shamaness. And these aren't, for those of us who are it's like a contemporary realm can lack some imagination. So if these are new concepts for us, it can feel like, oh, that's like some indigenous thing from some other continent. But in fact, again, all of our people had medicine people. All of our people had to embody these healing archetypes. And then ultimately the crone, the wise one, she who really births the future. And when I think of the most powerful archetype for me personally, and for many women that I know, it is really the wisdom of the crone. She who is no longer attached to the ego's right, wrong, this is what it's supposed to look like. This is what I expect. But really that wisdom of being in devotion, being in service to the future. And I love how the crone is often called she who gives no fucks, right? Like she who is like, yes, this is who I am. This is why I'm here. So this is one powerful way that we can come through our imagination to really come into a different relationship with our aging process. And another is simply being in nature. So I find that all these things, and it's so fun to talk about this and to use all these, concepts and to be in this theory and the philosophy and the story. But in reality, I didn't make this up. My teachers didn't make this up. Our ancestors didn't make this up. This is a direct transmission from our planet. Nothing on the planet would be here if it wasn't a quality or a property of the land itself. So in that way, because of the human ego mind, it can be very easy to forget that, of course, we are speaking of experiencing knowledge and concepts that is actually just a direct characteristic of the Great Mother, who is, of course, our planet Gaia. So when we go out and just literally spend time in nature, and of course, many of us are in cities. I lived in cities for most of my life. We were suburbia or San Francisco or Oakland, and it can feel like, oh, I need to go on a vacation, or I need to, what's nature? Do I have to go on a hike? In fact, nature is all around us all the time. And most importantly, nature is our bodies. So we don't need to make, this concept of nature is actually a colonialist concept, even just the word nature, right? It suggests that there is a separation between us and nature. But in fact, our bodies is 100% made of things that grow from the earth. It's made of the air element. It's made of the sun. And it is made of the water element, right? So we're very elemental beings, giving a shout out to Ayurveda that I know both you and I love, Elise. So just being in nature, but also being in the physical body and being in your, whatever that means for us, whether that's our breath practice, whether that's our yoga practice, whether that's our workout practice or our rock climbing practice, but just staying committed to meeting our physical body where we're at, even if that means reduced mobility as we age, which of course it will. At some point, it will mean we're not as capable of doing the things we used to do. And in that way, it looks like simply modifying with love and tenderness and gentleness and kindness, but staying committed to the earth, not as a theoretical concept or, oh, I want to recycle, or I want to, talk about how I'm committed to the earth, but staying committed to our physical health and being flexible and, like you said, humble in that aging process. That it doesn't, it's teaching us, it's ripening us. It doesn't look like what we thought it would look like. It never does. We keep getting humbled and humbled and humbled and humbled, but staying committed to the movement is really the key. For me, one of the main keys to super aging.
I love that. I'm wondering, I want to ask you a couple questions about the elders. And I know Karen probably has a question. But one thing, just before we do that, I think people might want, because you alluded to rituals and little things we could do. I'd love to hear a couple tips, because a lot of us listening, including myself, I mean, that separation from nature is big because we think like that. I mean, I teach like that a lot because that's how people's minds have been programmed. So if you could give us a couple tips that you use either with your students or I know you have a membership. What are some things that you tell people to do daily?
Yeah. So this does look different for everyone based on what their relationship is to practice. So I'll be very simple with it, because there are ways that, if we do have a daily meditation practice, for example, often we think about meditation as, a very still, meditation can almost walk the line of disembodiment for many of us, and many lineages overtly propose disembodiment, that our meditation or our yoga practice is actually a way to transcend our physical body. Whereas for me, in the lineage in which I practice, my seated meditation, of course, involves the calming the breath and staying with my breath as a means of escaping the constant stories in my mind. But it also looks like tapping into the simple bare bones building blocks of what nature is. And this would be acknowledged, of course, by Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, these ancient wisdom traditions, as well as many, if not most, indigenous traditions, which of course is the background of every being on the planet. At one time, we were indigenous to a land, and we continue, of course, to be indigenous to the earth. But these building blocks are air, fire, water, earth. And instead of, for me, so I'll speak first to someone who maybe does have a seated meditation practice, or even a moving meditation practice like yoga or qigong, that instead of just simply kind of clearing the slate constantly, like, oh, can I just think of nothing? Can I just be with nothing? What is it like to step in to the correlates of these elements in our own body, in our own mind? So the earth element maps to our physical body. So for me in this moment, I'm squeezing my thighs really gently in a way that feels good. I'm touching my arms. And this, of course, when we touch our body, has an incredibly calming effect on the nervous system. And the more we can keep that nervous system from being in overdrive every day, of course, the more our aging process eases and slows. The air element, which is our mental body, the water element, which is our emotional body, and the fire element, our soul body. So there are ways that we can, of course, with air element, take the breath. Right now, I'm reaching my arms over my head, and then I'm drawing my hands back to my heart. So before I write an article, before I interview on a podcast, before I need my mental body to be sharp, I simply remember my breath. I take a big, full breath. I exhale and release and let it go. And I allow the air element to nourish the mental body. Fire body. For me, in my meditation practice, before I enter, I have oil, which in my lineage maps to the fire element. And I like to rub it on my body. If you're familiar with chakras, it's a wonderful way to do it, right? What chakra needs help and love, or what part of my neck hurts, give that some extra love. Water element. I have water in front of me right now. I'm going to take a drink in just a moment, but this is an excellent practice. So we could take all of these off the meditation cushion, right? Every time we drink water is a transition point. It's a liminal space. So each of these moments throughout our day where we're transitioning from work to our car, or from the car to work, or we pick up our water and we take a sip. All of these moments I think of as thresholds. I think of as doorways, gateways, portals, pathways. And of course, that's symbolic language. It can sound like fancy, but in fact, it's very simple. That the neurological way we can think about this is that in those moments where we're actually changing something, we're doing something different from what we were doing a moment before, there is a greater capacity for awareness or consciousness, where we can pay attention in that moment. And if we actually in that moment, we use it to remember who we are, we use it to remember what we care about, we use it to remember our health, that is going to sink deeper into our neural map. So when we wake up, of course, then we get back to cycles, right? Because we wake up, and that is a powerful time, right? It sets the tone for our day. We go to sleep, those moments before sleep, such powerful portal moments. But really, every time we pick up a glass of water and we take a drink, it's a perfect opportunity. The way I think about it is remembering our intention. And I don't think of intention as being separate from earth wisdom. I don't think of it as being separate from the earth, because our mental body is our air body. The mind is nothing but pure awakened intelligence, as we might see in yoga philosophy and Buddhist philosophy, when we really look deep into the mystical traditions, that we can use the power of our intention. So for me, to remember, may my life be in service. May my life be a prayer in service. This is one intention I use very often. Every time I drink water, just calms my nervous system, brings me back. Or another intention I love to play with is, I forgive myself fully for being human. Which is another way of saying I forgive myself for being imperfect. I forgive myself for being crazy at times and being thrown completely off balance. So these are small examples of rituals. And I love to give these small examples because I also love like luxurious rituals out in nature. I love, going out on a full moon, on a hike in the mountains, and doing movement, dancing with the moon, right? That's a beautiful ritual. These are wonderful rituals, but how can we ground them in our daily life and the simplicity of our daily life? Maybe it looks like every time we wake up, we take 3 breaths, conscious breaths. That would be a huge accomplishment. That's big. That's really, to me, one of the most powerful earth rituals that any of us as humans could do, is to take 3 conscious breaths at any given moment of the day, whether it's at any transition, right? If we were to take 1 conscious breath at every major transition of our day, where we're moving from one thing to another, from a walk to lunch, from lunch to work, if we were to take 1 conscious breath, our whole life would transform in a short period of time.
Yeah, that I totally agree with that. And especially being a mom, that's a huge thing when you have kids, because usually, because as adults, we weren't taught that, we try to drag our kids from this activity to the next activity. And, we see with the kids, because they don't get it. They're like, wait, I'm having fun, playing soccer, playing with my friend. And we don't really teach transitions. And I love all the different transitions that you spoke about, from drinking water to getting out of bed to going to bed. They're so important. I want to see if Karen has any questions, because I do have a special question about elders for you.
I'm just really absorbing it all, because again, my day starts very early. It goes very long. And there are many days that I do not transition. Okay. I'm just constantly going. But just hearing this is a reminder, okay, that take those few seconds, and when those few seconds can get even longer, enjoy them. Stop feeling the guilt that so many of us feel. And one of the things that I do every night is I ride a stationary bike. But when I'm riding that stationary bike, I'm in my own zone. And I love that time period because TV can be on, people can be around me, but that's me. And I'm connecting with myself. So, keep giving us those tidbits because they're helpful.
I love it. I love it. I want to ask you about something I heard you say about, I'm curious because are we really lacking true elders because we're disconnected from nature? Or I kind of think they're hidden. The ones that are getting the most attention are the elders that may not be in alignment with what we call nature or the cycles of nature. And I actually gave a talk a couple years ago with one of my mentors about global elders that are, helping with climate change, helping with the planet, and bringing more of that earth wisdom. So I'm just wondering what you could say about this, because I think even that word elder has a different, it's different than senior or elderly. So what can you say about, who are the true elders? Wisdom, give us more.
Yes, beautiful. And I also just want to acknowledge what Karen said about your stationary bike at night. It's just such a beautiful example of the way, the multiplicity of ways that we can drop in to our inner space and that we can connect in with our body. And I just love that example so much because it's a ritual. It's a ritual that you have. And it connects you to yourself. It connects you really to your body. And ultimately, if you're connected to your body, you're connecting to your soul. Right. And we can tend to categorize these things as being, oh, well, that's just for exercise. But broadening the way our mind limits itself invites us into the fact that really we're all doing ritual all the time, actually. It's just we don't notice it. And so it can be kind of damaging when we don't notice it, because are we really doing the type of ritual that's contributing to the world we want to live in and to the body we want to live in? Whether that's our ritual of, eating a cookie after every meal or whatever, these, it's endless, the ways that our lives are constructed by habit. So I really honor that practice of yours. Thank you so much for sharing that. And this beautiful question of Elise, I so appreciate you bringing that up. And I think that I just bow down to this acknowledgement that our true elders are here, they're with us, but where is the media coverage? I would prefer on the news to be hearing about true elders and the differences that they're making for their families, for their communities, for holding, especially we can talk about Indigenous elders, the very few actually Indigenous elders we still have on the planet who are maintaining the old languages. Yes, so yes, for certainly our elders are out there, but like you said, understanding or working with the concept of elder is very different from the concept of senior. So the definition I love of elder is the being who is harvesting the fruits of their life as wisdom, and who is tapping in to the universal human wisdom, which, because of the way that life is constantly inviting us into the experience of humility, and because of the way that we are constantly being, let's say, beaten down by life, at least if we're running on our ego concept or really attachment to specific identity. This is the process of the human life, is that we come to be humbled and to realize that everything passes, even our concepts of who we are Certainly the way that we age, the way our bodies age is a huge part of that humbling process. That we release ideas of what we used to be able, to do perhaps, or perhaps not. I mean, but certainly the concept of super aging is very much about, maintaining the habits and practices that keep us in this thriving state. And yet that process of harvesting the wisdom of life is about offering it back. So while there are elders, and I see my life, the intention of my life, one of the primary intentions of my life is training to be a true elder, training to be a generous ancestor even. So even thinking beyond this physical life, I have found for myself that I have had an extreme lack of access to true elders in my life, even though I had some access to my literal grandparents, very little, but even then, I don't feel like I necessarily was mentored or guided until I began to sit in women's circles, which are the way that I have practiced women's circles and been generously invited into women's circles has been these circles of women of all ages. And of course, when I say women, I'm by no means sticking to the biological, XY chromosome definition, but self-identified women gathering together to speak the truth of what's in our hearts. And the concept of women's circles, which is so central to both my personal, to my heart, my personal practice, and to the really human history, is that we've always gathered in circles. Women have often gathered together to support the tribe around childbearing, around the new moon. We gather, often bleed together. These ways that women, especially now, that being in safe space where we can ask the question. This is the question often for women's circles is, how are you doing? Really? How are you doing really? And then the next question is like, what's most important for you? But once I entered into these spaces where I could actually be authentic versus I was raised very much, and I think maybe most of us are, I think the feminine shadow drives a lot of the younger years of our life. Certainly high schools tend to be replete with feminine shadows of jealousy, cattiness, or judgment, or needing to look a certain way, be a certain way, act a certain way. And then we internalize those constraints, those shackles. So when I was in these spaces with women of all ages is when I first had my first taste of the healing medicine that is available for the youth, that really, without the medicine of elders, it is an incomplete childhood. It is an incomplete teenagehood. It is for sure an incomplete early 20s. It is an incomplete motherhood. Definitely. I mean, we need the whole realm of motherhood is definitely due for an overhaul. My sister's about to give birth, and she's planning her postpartum, period. And she has to think about hiring a chef or who can she get, because she doesn't have a ton of community. She's moved to somewhere new. And this is new, right? This is all new, this separation from the support of our tribe, of our people. And really the leaders of any enlightened society, the leaders are by necessity elders. I don't know if either of you or anyone listening has ever read any of Starhawk's work, whether that's her nonfiction or her delicious, juicy fiction, which is dystopian and utopian and explores what it would look like to live in a culture where the elders were actually the leaders, and where it's not about being on a television screen and look, having the shiny, makeup and the spray tan and the black and the blue and red tie, but instead that it's a sacred circle of elders that makes decisions for the community based on the concept that we're doing this for the next 7 generations. And reading Starhawk's work, her fiction particularly, has given me such a hope for what's possible. Because of course, as we know, like you said, the elders that we do tend to be getting the media coverage, and the elders who, or the, let's say, the older beings who are running our country, let's say, I would love to have them in some circles exploring the wisdom of elderhood and having them harvest the wisdom of their life, which is honestly, it's hard work. I mean, this is the hardest work we will ever do as humans or beings on this planet. I mean, it means we face our shadows. It means we face our death. It means we face our deepest fears. And that is the constituent parts of an elder. It's one who has looked their mortality in the face and said, I choose love. I choose love here, and I choose to offer. I choose the path of truth and the path of love and the path of wisdom. I choose, instead of hardening my ego identity, I choose to release, surrender, to soften the edges of it, and to step into this place of humility and service. And of course, I'm in training to be an elder. I by no means am I an elder. So I want to just acknowledge that and speak with extreme humility. But the elders that I have been blessed to know in my life through these circles, and who have become friends and guides and mentors for me and teachers, this is what I see. These are the choices I see them embodying. And this is the medicine and the wisdom, that the nectar really that is imperative for healing the planet and stepping into this new era, which is here. It's the old is falling and the new is rising. And we really we desperately need our elders to have airtime, and we need guidance to become elders, right? That doesn't just mean older people need guidance to become elders. That means young people need guidance for that process of life that they're in, to really complete each psychological growth process and to step in to the evolution of the human life cycle.
I love that. I love everything you said. We need elders for the youth, and it's not an either or. It's not a competition, and it's not glorifying the youth. We are all needed and harvesting. I love that, because if, God forbid, we should only listen to the media, a lot of older people in the media are often defending, their right to be there as a leader, rather than harvesting their wisdom. And then that's a distraction. We could keep talking for hours. I know Karen and New Cleveland Radio are going to need to wrap this up. But I did want to say one last thing, because I know Hayley from way back in the day. And do you realize we used to teach, we were at the studio, the yoga studio called Yoga Tree on Stanion. Do you know that Starhawk used to do gatherings right across the street during my class? Yeah. Her mouth was opening. Yeah. Because we used to have, once a year during Halloween, it was she would have her Halloween rituals across the street at Kezar. Yeah. Just in case you didn't know. So I would just be like, let's take that vibe in. I would always say, what's going on? Sometimes they had the studio, everybody was across from this old stadium, kind of like, it's like a high school stadium. They had a lot of events, basketball, they had concerts, and they had roller derby, and they had Starhawk. So just so you know, we can close it out with
that energy moving through your class. I really just want to acknowledge what an incredible influence you've been on my life and my practice with your restorative class. So grateful that I mean, it's really been like, I don't know, 12 years or something since back, when we were at Stanyon together, Yoga Tree Stanyon. And it's just so beautiful to see the way that your work has flourished and your writing and you're offering in such beautiful service to the world. And I'm so grateful that you brought me on to your beautiful creation. Woo!
Thank you. Anything else you want to add, Karen, as we close it out?
Well, I know, Hayley, we'd love to have you back because many of our programs that we talk about is about evolving. Okay. When we use the word age, automatically it becomes this negativity. But when we think of ourselves as evolving, we're doing it constantly. And we have to start appreciating every movement we go through. And I too have to thank Elise because since we've been doing this podcast, I catch myself saying, it doesn't have to be bad. It doesn't, there are good things. Take a look. And I may be sitting in my office a lot, but I look out at the park that's right outside my window and I look for the trees. I look for the grass. I look for the birds. And it changes. It changes how you react and how you do things. So again, to your beautiful souls, thank you for bringing this out today.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Have a
Thank you.
great day. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Bye.